All right, welcome. I'm excited to welcome Josh Eyler here to the Opposite of Cheating podcast. I realize I didn't double check how to say your last name. Josh, did I get it right?
You did get that right. Yes, congrats. Very few
Awesome.
people do.
Well, yay for me.
Yeah,
Well,
starting
thank
off
you,
well.
Josh. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm calling this season two, even though this is an informal, it's not like it's a podcast on Apple Podcasts or anything like that. But I still am calling it season two because we're starting again with some new guests, and I'm happy to have you on at the beginning of this, what will be airing in the beginning of a new academic year too.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Well, let's start to help people get to know you a bit. What do you do and in what context?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I work at the University of Mississippi, where I'm the senior director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, and I'm also an assistant professor of teacher education. And I've been in the field of educational development for about the last 15 years. I've worked at a number of institutions, including George Mason and Rice, before I came to the
Okay.
University of Mississippi. I study and write about a variety of educational topics. I have a book called How Humans Learn, which was
Yep.
kind of a bird's eye view of the science of learning. And I just had a recent book called Failing Our Future, which is about bringing together a lot of different threads of the conversation about the harms that grades can do and what we can do about it.
Yeah, so super excited to delve into that. Every time I use the word delve now, I laugh even though I used it tons before. Yeah, we're excited to talk to you about that since it is part of the conversation that we have in the opposite of cheating that David
Sure.
and I have in there. So, but before we get to that, the question I ask everybody, your first memory of encountering this idea of academic integrity.
Yeah, I've been trying to rack
Mm.
my brain, and it's the fog of memory is definitely thick on this one. But I do recall being a kid, and I do remember an instance after taking a test where the teacher called me up and said that the next time I took a test, I had to use my arm to cover
Oh.
as much of it as I could because she saw someone cheating on me. And
Ah.
I was I'm maybe third grade or fourth grade. And so
So like a spelling test or a basic
it's
math
something like that,
test,
maybe
something like
math. I
that.
don't
Yeah,
I don't
something easy
know.
to copy.
Right.
Hmm.
And so I remember thinking two things. One was that I didn't realize that people did that. I'm certainly no saint, but it had not occurred to me
Yeah.
that this was something that people were doing in the classroom.
Yeah.
But the other thing, and the one that has, I think, stuck with me the longest, has was that I didn't understand why, especially at such a young age, that it was supposed to be my responsibility
Oh.
to protect the classroom and assessments from nefarious
Uh,
paper lookers or whatever it might be. That felt like a big burden for a third
yeah.
grader or a fourth grader, and I just couldn't quite wrap my mind around that at that age. And I think even now that academic integrity is a shared enterprise,
Yep.
it shouldn't feel like a burden to anyone. It should be integrity should be as much a part of academics as it is a part of any profession, right? What we want about in all our professions, and sometimes it's sorely lacking, but what we want is integrity and ethical pursuits, right? And
Yes.
so I think that that's part of what has stuck with me.
That's an amazing story. I actually have a book, I don't think it's on my shelf back there, called Cheater Pants, and it's a book written for, I think, third graders
Oh, wow. Okay.
about cheating. So I'll send you that reference later and I'll put it in the show notes for for everybody watching.
Perfect.
It's a really cute children's book. Okay, so speaking of grades, because you were taking a test for a grade,
Right.
to get feedback, whether it was on your spelling or your math or what have you. So yeah, in failing our future, it's really how grades harm folks. Now, so I'm fascinated by this conversation for a couple reasons. One, when I was writing my first book in 2008, and it's in the book, academic integrity in the 21st century, I talk about how grades in the colonial colleges, or in the, I guess it was in the antebellum era, were created as a way to control boys, young men, because it was men in college at that time, men's behavior, right? Because they were acting out, they weren't listening to the professors, and they thought, oh, wait, if we grade them and rank them, that will, we'll control their behavior, basically. And so I find it ironic every year, ever since I started in the academic integrity space, that now grades are the very reason why students are misbehaving if,
Mhm.
if they're cheating to get that grade. So
Sure.
I've just always been fascinated by grades. Also, when I moved from Canada to the US, a kind of a different grading system, which proves it's a little bit more subjective than we like to think in our heads that it is.
Right.
And David and I talk about in the book how grades can be one of the extrinsic motivations for students to cheat, right? When they're focused on getting the grade, completing the course, getting the degree, not
Mhm.
focused on the intrinsic value of learning, they're more likely to cheat. Um, and yet, I'm struck by the strong language of harming
Mhm.
students. And so I have a few questions for you, but the first one is just kind of a fundamental one. Are you saying that if there were no grades, nobody would ever cheat? Is this like the magic bullet solution?
Right.
Because everybody always wants me to have the magic bullet solution for cheating, right? So is this it, Josh?
It's a great question. And first, I just want to congratulate you and David for such a nuanced look and at grades in your book. I find that books about academic integrity often either shrug their shoulders and say, "There's nothing we can do," and about grades, or they take a harsher view of.
Prescriptive view, yeah.
Yes, very prescriptive. And you all talked a lot about alternative grading and ways
Hmm.
to actually mitigate the problem. So I thought that was fantastic. You are 100% correct that grades are pure behaviorism. In fact, the most famous book about grades is Alfie Kohn's Punished by Rewards.
Mm.
And the entire book is about how grades, among other things, are rooted in behavioristic psychology that see human beings as in the same light as Pavlov's
I was
dogs
going to say I'm
or
Pavlovian. Yep.
rats in boxes, that we respond to stimuli.
Yeah.
And grades, in that sense, are truly extrinsic motivators that are
Mhm.
designed to get people to do something that they might not otherwise do in a
Yep.
particular environment. And some of that well, a lot of it actually has to do with the kind of compliance that you were talking about.
Hmm.
Grades will get people into seats. They
Yep.
will get people to turn things in on time. They will even get people sometimes to contribute to a discussion or participate or do group work.
Yep.
But one thing I try to say all the time is just because someone is in a learning environment does not in any way guarantee that they will actually learn.
Right.
So grades can get them there, but
Yep.
doesn't mean that they'll learn.
Right.
Now, to get to your question
Yeah.
though, if we take them away,
Yeah.
will
They're all
students,
gone.
right? Will students suddenly be intrinsically motivated to learn, or will cheating suddenly stop?
Yeah.
The answer is no, of course not,
Ah,
uh, because uh, if you remove grades, you are removing a gigantic incentive for students to cheat. But grades are not the only incentive for
right.
students to cheat. And
Right.
so therefore you can take you are addressing one particular problem. It does not mean, and I talk to faculty a lot about this, that if you get rid of grades, it also does not mean that students are magically intrinsic learners,
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that has to be done to make that a part of a learning
Yeah.
environment and the learning experience. So it's no magic bullet for any of the answers, but especially not. I mean, I don't I use collaborative grading or
Yep.
ungrading, as you phrase it in your book, which takes grades almost as completely out of the picture as you possibly can in an institution.
Yeah.
And the times where I see any academic misconduct have nothing to do with grades, because if there are no grades, there's no reason to be cheating
Mhm.
on the learning part of it. But the times where I see the times where I have seen it in the past, though few, have been connected to the time that it takes to do something, right?
Yeah.
That's another incentive. Students are very busy. They have amazingly busy lives. Their lives are every second is eaten up by something, right? And so time is an increasing pressure
Mm.
that I think is also out there as an
Hmm.
incentive.
So, yes, I'm glad to hear you say that, although I wish it was a magic bullet solution. I think when the ungrading stuff first started coming around and people thought, some people would say this is it. People would bring up how people would cheat in MOOC classes and Coursera classes, even though there were no grades and they were supposed to be taking them for their own interest or professional development. So, to your
Yes.
point.
And I think that that's a classic case of the time variable, not
Yeah. So on the time thing, though,
yeah.
I think we
Sure.
have a lot of tropes in higher education, right? We have a
Yeah.
lot of things that we say that we begin to believe and begin to become normalized as true. We do know that students today have to work more because college and university costs more. Okay, so we
Mhm.
know that. We do know that when it's a non-traditional age student, they might have family, they might have caregiver responsibilities. In certain cultures, there's more expectations for the kids to do more culture caregiving for grandparents and aunts and uncles than, for example, my family, right? Like no one would have expected me to drop out of school and go home to take care of an aunt or a grandmother. So there's some cultural differences there. So all that's true. And yet we also know from other research that youth and adults spend a lot more time on their phones and doom scrolling and gaming and doing a whole bunch of things that suck up time. So
Mhm.
so is it that they really don't have a lot of time, or is it that
Oh,
they're mismanaging their time, they're choosing to do things other than, the learning?
I I think it's all of the above,
Yeah.
right? I think that uh, the time variable encompasses all of that, right?
Okay.
It could be they've been doing something else with their time, productive or not, and
Right.
suddenly get into a time crunch, which has
Yes.
nothing to do with whether or not they are motivated by doing well in the course. It
Yeah.
has to do with another kind of constraint. So I
Yeah.
completely hear you there.
Okay. So your other book was about learning science.
Mhm.
So why, and you mentioned in talking about grades, we have to do all this other stuff. And I think it was Susan Bloom or somebody else has said that like ungrading or alternative grading doesn't work if you don't also change your pedagogy, right? Like you can't just slap this on as a band-aid to and keep your lecture format and your, everything else. Why is it so difficult to convince, to entice, to intrinsically motivate college students to learn when we are all born as humans motivated to learn? We're
Mhm.
motivated, like we want to walk, we want to talk, we want to learn how to ride that bike, we want to go to school. Most of us, when we first started going to school, is it like Susan Bloom talks about in schoolishness, like it's the system that kills that? Like, why is it so difficult to get people to do something that humans are naturally, I think, evolved to do or have always done?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Like, why is
So
it so hard, Josh?
the
Teacher.
the spark for me thinking about the ideas that led to that first book was watching my then newborn daughter, exploring the world for the first time, and the curiosity there was
Oh my
just
God, it's so
so
great.
visceral
Yeah.
that suddenly a million questions were kind of in addition to all the ones that a new father has. It was I was also having questions about what happens to this.
Yeah.
And I have a chapter about curiosity in that book. And one of the researchers I was reading for that is named Susan Engel.
Mm.
And uh,
Engell, right? Engel.
I think so.
Yeah.
And she wrote a great book about curiosity and
Mm.
education and schooling. And I was there's a passage that really stuck out for me that she says, beyond infancy, beyond the first
Yeah.
part of childhood, a student's curiosity is shaped by their environment, right? The
Yeah.
people who they are around and what is
Yep.
happening in school.
The
And so
structures.
Right, exactly. So the system is certainly a part of that. And I'm the biggest fan of teachers and the biggest critic of school districts.
Yeah.
Because there are so many facets of modern education that push back against that natural impulse to be
Hmm.
curious. Standardized
Yeah.
testing, boxed curriculum,
Yeah,
all
totally.
the things that we see in a lot of our modern educational institutions. So
Yeah.
that primarily what happens then is that students learn, and Susan Engel says this, Susan Bloom says this,
Lots of people.
lots and lots of people say this, that what happens is that students learn how to be strategic learners in that environment.
Yeah.
They see that it's a game that they have to play in order to get
Yeah.
to the next level. So they quickly say, what do I have to do to get there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that curiosity and all the things that we hope as educators are a part of that development often fall to the background because there's no incentive for
Yeah.
folks to really bring them to the fore.
Yeah, and we normalize shortcuts, right? And we praise shortcuts and we almost idolize shortcuts. If you think about, you said get to the next level, so it made me immediately think of gaming, right? Where there's cheat sheets. They call them cheat sheets to, ooh, what's some hidden, right? Or in work with AI, the whole thing is built on reducing, eliminating friction, shortcuts, making things more efficient. So our society really venerates that. And so, of course, students are going to absorb that and apply it to the school
Mhm.
process as well, right?
And I don't blame them because that is the system we have set up
Yeah.
and have placed them in.
Yeah. Yeah. I always love to say, like, I don't get to talk to like parents very often, parent groups very often, particularly parents of high schoolers or younger. But when I do, I say, like we hear this, like the kids today, and it's like, well, who raised those kids and who created the structures and systems in which those kids were raised?
Right.
And in that sense, behaviorist psychology was right. Like we are influenced by external stimuli.
Oh,
We are
yes.
influenced and shaped. Like I say, I jaywalk in San Francisco because otherwise you're going to get, trampled. But I don't do it in Singapore, right?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, the question is not whether they work. They
yeah,
do. The
yeah.
question is, are they the best tools to get people to
Right,
learn? And
right.
the answer to that is no.
No,
Right.
yeah. Did you know that I trained a rat for my psychology of learning class, to raise a Canadian
Uh,
flag on
really?
cue? Yes, yes, that was part of
That
her.
is quite a feat.
Very, very proud, very proud. Um, okay. So I want to hone in because I know this is where a lot of faculty are going, you might lose some faculty in your argument.
Mhm.
And it's the word harm. Um,
Yeah,
People get graded all the time in the real world. Every April to June, we have to do performance appraisals, and I have to give people grades in in their work. I have to give them an E or an A or an S. Um, I get, people get evaluate customer service. Like we get evaluated and we get graded constantly in the real world. So aren't we harming students by not preparing them for that reality by saying we're going to take away all the grades? I listen to, I'm projecting here.
right,
Just get
right,
rid of
sure.
all the grades and just give students feedback and everything will be grand and they won't be harmed anymore. Aren't they being harmed by us not prepping them for that?
Okay, there's a lot of pieces to this.
Yeah.
So let's first think about the idea of harm. And so the first part of the book is looking at certainly the harm to learning and
Yes.
motivation. But there are two other major categories of harm that I think are even more important than
Yeah.
that. One is the connection of grades to the exacerbation of stress and
Mental
the
health.
mental health crisis
Mhm.
among kids. And the other is how grades mirror and magnify inequities that have always been a part of the American educational system.
Mhm.
So an A is not an A is not an A everywhere you go,
Right.
right? And certain populations of students have had more opportunities to practice the kinds of
Mm.
school skills that will get them A's in college than other groups of
Yeah.
students. That is tied to histories of racism, it's tied to economic inequality, all sorts of things, right?
Yeah, access to tutors and access to all these things. Yeah.
Exactly, right? And so all of that together is the harm with a capital H, I think, that I see combined
Hmm.
with what grades are doing to students. So that's the first piece of it. The second is that is inflicted upon our youngest in society, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about age 5 through, if we're talking traditional age college students,
21. Yeah.
5 through 22,
Yeah.
right? These are brains that are not even yet completely
Hmm.
developed, which doesn't
Hmm.
happen until 25, 26
Yep.
ultimately.
And
Um,
some people maybe even later.
right? Or right? So yeah, this is not so you're not just sending messages and shaping learning behaviors and inhibiting certain processes and sending messages about whether or not people are right for certain fields. You're doing it to the most vulnerable developmentally
Yeah.
people in our society, and that matters, right? And so the 50-year-old and I'm almost 50 myself, so the 50-year-old director of a teaching center getting an evaluation from my supervisor is
Hmm.
very different from an 8-year-old getting a C on
Fair.
a math test.
Okay.
And so I think that I don't think, yes, there is a reason, there's an argument to be had here,
Hmm.
but I don't think that in that argument we can elide those differences so easily, right?
Fair enough. Fair
Um,
enough.
and at least at my university, all we get is feedback, and there may be improvement plans,
Yeah.
but but you know, if I am evaluating or being
Hmm.
evaluated, it's really you've done well at this, and maybe you could work a little bit more on this, and
Hmm.
that's really what we're talking about with the value of feedback and learning in
Right.
if we're thinking about what does education look like in the absence of grades. And
Yeah.
there are, of course, colleges that don't give grades, like
Right.
Evergreen State, and that's the one that I featured, but in the book. But there are others, and more individuals in higher ed. Some programs are shifting, not getting rid of grades, but changing their model. And in your book, you talk about things like specifications grading,
Hmm.
standards-based or mastery-based grading,
Hmm.
in addition to ungrading. Lots of change in that direction
Yeah.
because what people see is this is a way that I can maintain my standards for
Yep.
my teaching and my discipline
Yep.
while also releasing the pressure valve on students and giving them learning is a deeply complex process that unfolds at different rates for everyone. And
Yeah.
so alternative grading models allow that learning to happen on the student's own internal time frame rather than
Yeah.
saying in week 3 you get this grade on this exam and that's going to put you in a certain position to succeed
Yeah.
the rest of
Or
the
not.
semester. Yeah, exactly.
So then it's really so it's really tied to changing our obsession with our 20th century model, not just of grades, but of the Carnegie credit hour, bums
Yes.
and seats. Like, you will learn and you will have all the knowledge and skills you need after 190 credits. And so then you get all these conversations about, because of the expense of college, we got to reduce from 4-year degrees to 3-year degrees. It's still about credit hours, and none of it is about learning, and none of it is
Mhm.
right. And so what I heard you saying is like, if so what I talk a lot about in my talks is future changes. Like, what we really need to change is to move towards competency based education, right? Which to me really goes well with alternative types of feedback and
Sure.
evaluation and grading, much more so than the 10-week quarter or the 14-week semester, where we can talk about mastery based, which means, right, students might get a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance to demonstrate their mastery.
Right.
But if they still only have 14 weeks, you're given a lot of, we call them IPs here, incompletes, for a student to be able to continue to do that. So there are structural complications there, right? Like you
Yes.
still have to give grades at the end of the semester to the
Correct.
university.
Yes. Hmm.
So how do
Yeah.
you reconcile that giving students student A only learned it in 2 weeks, student B needs to, 4 weeks. How do you reconcile that within that semester system requirement and
Yeah. So
requirement?
it depends on the model that you're using, right? So something like standards-based grading, which a lot of STEM
Yes.
faculty
Specs grading teach. Yep.
who are interested in changing have
Yeah.
moved to,
Yeah.
because it's a way of saying standards based. For example, here are 18 standards for the course.
Yeah.
If you show me that you have demonstrated competency in 16 of them, you get an A. 14 of them, you get a B. So it's a
Yeah.
way of still being able to put that grade in, but having it reflect development over time rather than how did you do on individual
Yeah.
exams and things like that.
Yeah.
With collaborative grading or ungrading, which is what I do, the emphasis is on my feedback and student self-assessment throughout the semester. The grade is given collaboratively through a conference at the end of the semester where they have to put together a massive portfolio of
Hmm.
reflection on their work and the learning outcomes, and then they propose a grade, and we talk about their grade proposal. As it's a, I mean, it's a very different kind of approach. For me, it uh, it is useful because it helps students to see the strengths and opportunities for growth within their own work.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want most from my students when they graduate is to be able to have a good self barometer for their work so that when they get feedback from whomever, they can say, that's a really good point. I do need to build on that. Or, that's interesting, but I disagree. I think that this is what I was trying to say, and I think that this is a stronger approach. So
Mm.
I find collaborative grading to be helpful for that. I find it to be an answer to the role that grades have played historically
Yeah.
in
God, I have
education.
so many more questions for you. I know we're running out of time, but I do have to ask these two questions. So the reason David and I weren't prescriptive in our book is because it so much depends on the situational factors of your classroom, of course. So my guess is with collaborative grading, you've got like 30 or fewer students in that class.
I personally do, but I also know some who do it with hundreds of students.
Really? So the
Yes.
TAs do the
Either
conferences.
TAs or they use the LMS to their benefit. And
Okay.
one key feature of doing collaborative grading in large classes is that they will have conferences only with the students whose proposals they
They
disagree
disagree
with.
with.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
And the reason I ask that is because I know that's why STEM, the STEM faculty are more prone to specs or standards grading
Mhm.
because it seems more scalable to larger number of students.
Yes.
But that's a good point. You only have to conference with the students you have a gap with in
Right.
terms of the judgment. Um, so that's helpful. And I've already forgotten my second question that I was gonna say, but that's okay. People can just read your book and get all their
Mhm.
questions answered. Um, I do, I'm a big fan of the mastery based stuff, right? I think grades harm because it's usually a one shot and done thing.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of it is grades without feedback
Mhm.
or the one shot and done thing. And also, given what you said before about the brain still forming and it's different for a 50-year-old to get graded than an 8-year-old, what about scaffolding in that more kind of traditional, or are you saying, no, I mean, the workplace has got to change and they got to stop giving grades for performance as well?
Oh, I don't know about that. But what I will say is that it's really not clear to me whether our educational institutions have to prepare students for the workplace in that way,
Mm,
right? Or is that something that people can learn
on the job.
while they progress through their professions? What is our charge? At least in my opinion, giving students the tools they need, disciplinary or otherwise, gen ed, to succeed within a profession of their choosing. But I don't, people, I think, society wants to load a lot of responsibility onto
Yes, true.
what educational institutions should do.
Yeah.
And I'd like to shine the mirror back at the professions and say, some of this you need to take care of as well. We will help students be ready to change the world.
Yeah.
If you want them to learn how to fit within your evaluation system, that's on you.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. I was thinking more along the lines of like this, that we definitely should be working on in education, and you can do this without grades,
Mhm.
is helping people give and receive feedback,
Yes.
because that's just
Yes.
communication skills, and we need that in all aspects of life, our marriages, our parental child
Oh,
relationships, like
certainly.
everywhere, right? So, yeah, I agree. I think, our job is to prepare students to be learners.
Mhm.
I was just listening to a podcast with the president of Wesleyan College and he said college is to help people figure out what they love to do and how they can get better at it, and then to get better at it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't
Oh, I
mean,
like that a lot. Yeah.
yeah, that doesn't mean engineering necessarily. It just means like, I love problem solving, or I love communicating, or whatever. So let's wrap that up, because we haven't talked a lot about AI's impact on this. So what does um what is this whole grading, how does this whole grading movement fit in with this age of AI? Does it change it at all? Does it make it more pertinent? Um, could I use AI to scale up my collaborative grading process? Like, what say you about the intersection of this generative AI revolution and the grading movement
Well, um,
in 20 seconds or less? No, I'm kidding.
yeah. So I think, and I was been pondering this. I if there's a spectrum of belief and adoption about generative AI in education, I am on the end of the spectrum that is the more resistant to AI. Um, I'm certainly there are people who are experimenting with it and thinking through these questions. I have real ethical questions about it, and I
Mhm.
also, just from a learning sciences point of view, am very wary about what AI can potentially be doing to the learning process
Yes.
itself. It's like a muscle, right? The more you exercise the learning muscle, the
Yep.
stronger you get. But the minute you stop, it begins to atrophy. And so, if we're allowing AI to do the hard parts of learning, that's really dangerous, I think, from an educational point of view.
Yeah.
Now, from the
Like David says, like getting a forklift to do the weights for you at the gym.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, absolutely right. So now, from the grading perspective, I have an amazing colleague here in the center, Dr. Emily Donahoe.
Mm-hmm.
She has a Substack, Unmaking the Grade, where she has talked a lot about this. And her point over and over again is that that there are no easy answers to this question, that the only way to frame this is to make education and the activities we ask students to do to be meaningful and directly relevant to their learning,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not going to there are no shortcuts through this problem, that we
Yeah.
have to really take a hard look at what we are doing in the classroom, the assignments that we're giving, the things we're asking them to do in and outside of the classroom, and making sure that they are meaningful above all.
Yes. And so what I'm finding in this second season so far is that I have probably a new tag line for the end of every episode, which is, and institutions need to give faculty the time, training, and support that they need to be able to do that, because we
You're
have
here.
to stop asking them to rebuild the plane while they're flying it.
Yes.
So thank you, Josh, very much for taking the time and for entertaining my questions that you weren't expecting, and talking to us about how grades harm students and what we can do about it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tricia. I appreciate it.